You might recall that about 90 days ago, I published a video or a series of videos about the rebuild of what you're seeing here, the 494 and 495. What was unusual about this is that what the original train, that is these Alco diesels, were is unknown. It can't be identified, as I know of, anywhere on the train. But what is on the outside is a custom paint job, which is just outstanding workmanship. And so I emphasize that in the video. What I'm ready to do now is to pick up with the rebuild of the coaches. Now, I had one of the coaches from the owner when I rebuilt these, but now I've been given the 5 coaches that go with the set that are also custom painted and just absolutely beautiful that match this. I'm going to show those in just a minute. But if you get time, go back about 90 days and you'll see the rebuild of these. I want to revisit one thing that before I move forward that I've mentioned several times in videos, and that's regarding these oil wicks whose lubrication point is described right here, oil, here, as being something that simply was not very useful. Now, thank goodness I had a viewer or subscriber clarify that these in fact are intended to lubricate the bearing that is on the armature. Specifically, this is a bronze oil impregnated oolite bearing. So it does need some lubrication. Now, it requires a oil to replenish oil loss during operations in those bearings. And the Gilbert engineers, that one person pointed out, said that the Gilbert engineers probably had the correct design, and that is used an oil wick. But what I have found is I found these wicks to be in varying conditions. Some almost disintegrate when I pull them out. Sometimes I can't even pull some of them out. They just tear up. So I have to push them out from the other end, or one or the opposite end. Others are dry, as if they had never been used. Others almost feel like that the lubricant that's on them has solidified. And others feel like they're just dripping wet. I take them out and roll them around on a piece of paper, and they leave quite a trail of oil, but they almost disappear and disintegrate when I do that. So the thought is that dropping oil here would eventually wick up to the oil-like bearing and replenish it there, that in fact lubricates that bearing with the shaft on the armature, a very probably heat-producing point that does need lubrication. Now, what I've done in the past, as you've seen me do, is I'll shift the bearing in one direction on the shaft and then lubricate the shaft with a gear oil, which I consider a high viscosity oil. Then I'll shift the bearing back and lubricate it there, and then I'll shift the bearing back and forth and back and forth until I feel like it's lubricated underneath. But I've not paid any attention to these other than just to reinsert them. But now what I'm going to do with my own trains is I have recently ordered from Portlines replacement wicks. And I've ordered them for all of my steam locomotives in my collection and all of my diesels in my collection. I think what I'm going to do is, the first time I try this, I'm going to take those wicks and I'm going to pre-dampen them with the gear oil and then reinsert them. They should insert just fine. Then put a drop of that oil on the wick, but rotate the engine over for about 24 hours until some of that oil has the opportunity to travel down to the bearing, and then see if it wicks it up from that point on. I want to give this complete diligence, but I had ignored it before. I thought that in researching this, and again, I'm thankful for the subscriber who viewed the video and said, I think this is what these are, and I took a collaborative approach with others as well to get their take on what these were, to point it out. I thought I had exhausted all resources. Hannon, Deeger, Mr. Barker, everybody, every book I could find online and everything, to get a clarification of what these are for. I even consulted a engineered drawing, scale drawing, of the assembly of an Alco diesel. Let's take a look at that for just a second. This is a drawn to scale engineered drawing of the assembly instructions for an Alco diesel. It's very interesting to look at. And apparently it was sent to service stations in February of 1959. So that means it was probably for the later Alco diesels. One of the things that kind of supports that is the fact that it's clear right here that what they drew in was the two-position reverse unit, so it kind of gives way. But I thought I'd read this word for word to see if I could find anything on there about the oil wicks. If they're that important, why'd they mention them? Right here in the drawing, and I'm not going to read it to you, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 lines of instructions, very detailed instructions on how to lubricate these diesels. But nowhere is the oil wick mentioned. And I thought, well, if it's that important, why would they not put it on the engineered drawings? I looked over here on these lists. I looked up here in the revisions, so forth. As a matter of fact, it's got right there, final assembly diesel locomotive. It's got the part number. It was drawn in March of, maybe it's 54. And it was checked in 57, and it's drawn in 57, checked in 57, applied by March. I can't quite read that date, but this says service stations February 21st. But anyway, I think it validates that this is probably one of the later Alco diesels. But I thought I exhausted all resources, and maybe I had. But this one doesn't mention a thing about it. Surprised me. Well, getting back to the diesels from the drawings, I've ordered replacement diesel motor oil wicks for all of my diesels and oil wicks for the back of the brush bracket assembly for all my steamers. And I'm going to use them. I'm going to somehow find a way to prime them, or at least do a pilot test on both, and then put them in a position that they would promote the draining downward of the oil, downward of the oil for about 24 hours, maybe put 1 drop on it. And I'm probably going to use that gear oil. I'm certainly not going to use 3-in-1. I think that is maybe a roadmap to failure. I don't want to see that oil slung, and I have had experience in my early rebuilds of Alcos 10 years ago that I did use 3-in-1, and I know that there's engineering in those that might prevent the slinging of oil, but I found that the 3-in-1 sometimes would end up on the commutator, especially on steam, and that too is a roadmap to failure, getting oil on a commutator. So I'm going to start over on all of mine, but I'm going to do it with new oil wicks, and then I'm going to be checking those much more carefully on others. There is one thing, it's sometimes hard to tell whether or not the oil wick that's in a diesel as I rebuild them from owners, it was actually installed at the factory or was something substituted for them. I found a couple of them that I thought the wicks looked like pipe cleaners, a small pipe cleaner, because it had a spine going down the center of the wick that was metal. It was a piece of wire. Could have come from the factory later on, I'm not sure, but I was a little suspect of those, but I kept them in there because they were owned by somebody else other than me. Okay, with all this being said, I want to show you these passenger coaches.